morning. We will call the November 29th, 2021 work session to order. Item 2.1.
Approve additional loan financing in the amount not to exceed $1.8 million for an 81-unit affordable housing development project at 610 Franklin Street and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. Chuck Lane.
Thank you, Chuck Lane, Economic Development Housing Department. At the October 18th Community Redevelopment Agency meeting, CRA Director Amanda Thompson provided an update for you regarding the proposed tax credit housing development project planned for 610 Franklin Street. That, of course, is where Fire Station 45 was previously located. Recall in 2019, the CRA put out an RFP to attract tax credit developers to submit proposals for housing development at the site. Blue Sky Communities LLC was a successful respondent. The CRA entered into a contract to sell the property to Blue Sky, and they proceeded to submit an application to Florida Housing Finance Corporation under their 9% tax credit program. That's Florida Housing's most highly funded and highly competitive program. Blue Sky was unsuccessful in 2019, but submitted again in 2020 and won. That application included a $610,000 loan commitment from the city. This loan is what Florida Housing calls the Local Government Area of Opportunity Funding Commitment. It's needed for the project to achieve maximum basis points in Florida Housing application scoring criteria. City Council approved this loan on October 1, 2020. So Ms. Thompson's presentation last month explained a funding gap that has developed, and it's threatening the financial feasibility of the project. Since Blue Sky submitted its application to Florida Housing, total development costs have increased about $5.4 million. This is mostly due to the sharp increases in construction costs we've seen during the pandemic. Blue Sky has secured an additional $1.3 million in conventional financing and has asked the city to commit an additional $2 million. If approved by council, Blue Sky will request $2 million from Pinellas County in their Pinellas County Penny for Pinellas program. So at the October 18th CRA discussion, you asked staff to recommend a funding strategy in response to Blue Sky's request. So the first thing we did is we asked Blue Sky to increase the percentage of its developer fee. So by doing so, a larger portion of the developer fee is paid from future cash flows rather than at the closing table, so more funding is available for the upfront capital outlay. This will provide an additional $389,000 to apply directly to that funding gap. Staff is proposing an additional $1.8 million using funding from state and federal sources. We're proposing three additional loans. A $150,000 loan using SHIP funds, State Housing Initiative Partnership Program funds. An additional home loan in the amount of $775,000. As you know, the Home Investment Partnership Program is funded by HUD. These two funding sources are to be exclusively used for affordable housing. We're also recommending an additional funding from the Home ARP American Rescue Plan program in the amount of $875,000. This funding source is also provided by HUD in response to the pandemic, and as a result has different rules and regulations than the traditional home program. This funding source is not to be confused with the $21 million pot of money that the city has received from the Treasury. Home ARP is a different funding source and is distributed to entitlement communities across the country. So our job as staff will be to ensure that these funds are used in accordance with funding source regulations, which means we'll monitor annually to ensure compliance. This is very typical of these types of projects and typical of the work we do in the housing division. So just to briefly touch on loan terms, the initial loan for $610,000 as approved by council previously will have a 4% interest rate. The staff is recommending a 0% interest rate for the additional loans. All loans will be deferred through the construction period and will be paid back over the following 20 years. If approved by council, staff will need to prepare a substantial amendment to our consolidated plan to budget these expenses, and I'll come back to you at a later date to request approval of that amendment. Sean Wilson, President of Blue Sky, is here today if you have any questions of him, and that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Before we go to questions, I am associated with Raymond James Financial Services. This is some of the money coming through from tax credits and Raymond James Bank, which is a different entity, but it is all under Raymond James Financial umbrella. I need to disclose that. The city attorney little ambiguous, but believes that I can vote on this. I do not need to recuse myself, but I need to disclose the fact that we do clear through Raymond James. So, any questions for Mr. Lane? Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, I have, I'm excited about this project and hope it goes forward, but I had a couple of questions on the legislative text, so that first page document, and I think you answered one, or I connected the dots. So, it states Blue Pierce also agreed to increase its deferred developer fee, which will reduce the portion of the developer fee paid at closing by $389.22, which would directly contribute to filling that gap. So developers have to pay a fee normally at closing just to be developers in our city?
It's a fee paid to the developer through the project revenue. It's paid to the developer. That's an incentive to the developer to build projects like this.
Okay, and they're gonna defer it until, okay, that's fine. And then, I had, just a question. The last sentence there says, "The final county grant amount, if approved, will be based on the property's appraised value." Is that the property as it is now, or what we anticipate the value after it gets?
They're having a new appraisal done.
Okay.
And so it'll be in accordance with that new appraised value, which presumably will be higher than before.
When was the last appraisal done?
I believe 2019, if I'm not sure if it was 19 or
Okay.
19, and it was appraised, I think the higher of the appraised values was $2 million.
Okay. And what's the likelihood, do we think, that the county will chip in the $2 million?
I think fairly likely. I think it's, I certainly can't speak for them, but I think this project fits right in line with what their goals are of that program.
Okay. And then I guess the background paragraph, my notation is, do you have any, I was just wanting some perspective, like how many respondents did we have for that CRA issued an RFP on August 17th, 2019? Did you have a bunch of respondents?
We had, I want to say it was 3 or 5. We had 3.
Okay. Okay. All right. And then I guess I'll just, make the point that, the staff recommendation and then the 9-story 81-unit housing development with 2-story 81 parking space and the mix of AMI is exactly what our Pinellas County Housing Compact lays out that we need to be doing. And so I think it's a great project, and I hope it goes forward. And the other point I guess I'd make is that if these cost increases are due to building materials increase, then every municipality is experiencing these kinds of things that have affordable housing projects queued up or something, right? So we're not unique. And if we want more affordable housing in our community, this is what we've got to do to make it happen. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's experiencing this. This isn't just specific to this project. Mm-hmm. Construction costs have gone up dramatically.
Councilmember Bunker.
I'm also very glad that you found a way to make this possible, and I sure hope we go with this. If the county doesn't come up with the $2 million, is our commitment based on their decision?
I don't anticipate that we'll increase our commitment. That would be on Blue Sky. If they wanted to fill the remainder of the gap, or if they had the ability to do so, that would be a decision they'd have to make.
Yeah.
And in fact, if the county commitment comes in at a higher amount, we anticipate that we would lower our amount to fill only the gap.
Okay.
Okay.
Vice Mayor.
What's the difference between Blue Pierce and Blue Sky?
Blue Pierce is an affiliate of Blue Sky.
Okay. Now, my whole thing here is this is a difficult piece of property. I mean, its physical location is, I don't think, very attractive for a lot of different uses. We're only talking 81 units here. It's not like we're building 250 or something of that nature. But these numbers are huge. I mean, these are big numbers. I mean, it's basically breaks down to, the total government funding for this is over $65,000 a unit for the construction. And once it's built, what's our return? Is there a return? Or is it just the fact that it's affordable housing and people will be living in downtown and we realize some return that way?
Well, it is a loan. We'll receive regular payments until that loan is repaid in full.
Is it a zero interest or is it?
The additional funding is 0% interest.
I mean, I'm conflicted. I mean, it's an awful lot of money for 81 units, but it's a difficult property to do anything else with. Somebody said, well, we could get a brewery in there. Well, I don't think anybody wants to put a brewery right next to the police station. And those two just don't. Those are not symbiotic partners. You say you're pretty confident that the county is going to come through with their $2 million.
Yes, sir.
I would say this is the last bite of the apple I'm willing to extend on this project. It's kind of where I sit right now. I'm not thrilled about it, but it's the last bite of the apple I'm willing to give.
Councilmember Albrecht?
I've always liked this project. It's workforce housing downtown. It's a great spot location-wise to transit, and we just don't have enough of this in Clearwater. So this is a great start. So the only hiccup in this was the additional cost after after they didn't get their funding the first time around. I didn't think they were going to get it the second time. They did. And I can tell you, I've been involved with that sort of funding before, and it's difficult, as with all kinds of funding. So I was happy to see that they got it, and the only hiccup was the difference now, the rise in costs, and I'm glad I think these different loan programs to fill the gap is better than putting it on the CRA, so I'm for that.
Well, I think we're making a terrible mistake by funding this. 81 units does not move the needle. I think we need to think beyond just the affordable housing component here, but I think we need to think strategically about downtown as a whole. PSTA did not get the money in this latest round of funding to move the depot over to Court and Myrtle. And we've been in conversations about a new city hall. I don't know why we would be getting rid of a piece of property next to the police department, the MSB garage, the MSB, and the enormous subsidy that this requires. I think there are too many things in flux with the new city hall, PSTA, and potentially using this property also to trade for more strategic property for downtown with the Church of Scientology. So I just think that, they have gotten several bites of the apple. I think the city's been patient, but I think it is the wrong decision. And I think we need to look at this more strategically than just a single project. I think it's a nice project. I think the developer has great qualifications and has done good work around the Tampa Bay area. It's not a matter of that. It's all about thinking beyond just a single project and thinking about the entire downtown and being strategic in what we do. And I think if you approve this, you're playing checkers, and we need to be playing chess. And I just think it's a terrible mistake. I won't put it on consent because I will be voting against it on Thursday night, whether I'm alone or I have other people that support me. I think we will look back and regret this decision. So that's my stance. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Bunker and then Beckman.
Only 8 of those units are affordable housing, right?
All of
No,
the units are.
all of them.
All these, I thought many of them were workforce. Okay. As far as,
80% area median income is the highest income level.
okay. As far as, the bite of the apple, Scientology has pretty much bitten us down to the core. I'm not sure if we want a nice shiny new Scientology property at that prime location either. I would rather see people having a place to live, work, and play downtown. And yeah, it's costly, but I think it's going to be worth it. We don't have any other developers coming up to our chessboard. So maybe a game of checkers is okay right now.
With all due respect, I mean, the information you just asked for was in the agenda item. But it's not even a new shiny building potentially for them, as it could be a new shiny building for us. And that new shiny building may go somewhere where you really don't want it, like between Chestnut and Court, or right on Fort Harrison and Court. So I think you're being naive. Councilmember Beckman.
Well, there are a couple things that I get concerned about. I mean, number one is, a priority of mine is advocating for more affordable workforce housing. And I'm also thinking about what we communicate when we've been in this process since the RFP went out in August 17th of 2019, and we've worked with Blue Sky, and they didn't get their funding, and then we waited, and they resubmitted, and now we've have some challenges with COVID. Meanwhile, our affordable housing crisis continues to increase, and if now, after staff and after this developer has put in over 2 years of work to make this work, now we're saying, sorry, I don't think so. I want to open it up for a potential trade or someone who might be interested in that property, namely the church. And that's why I asked the question, what was the background? How many respondents did you get? I mean, when you put out an RFP and the property's there, people need to respond. And then if they do or don't, we make our decision and move on. But I don't like this back and forth. I just don't think it sends a good message. I think this is a great project. When we entered into it and worked with the developer, it continues to be a very good project, and I think we need to stick with it. And the question about, the increase in price is something totally out of anyone's control, and it's what other communities are experiencing. I still want affordable housing in my community, and so this is what we have to do to get it. So that's my thought process.
Anything else?
Talk about it Thursday.
Well, previous councils can't obligate future councils, and a previous council did this, so it is different. There is a new team, and I appreciate your comments about people that have been working on a project for many years. I hope you'll remember that when it's a private investor and developer somewhere else, because I certainly will remember that comment in the future. I hope it applies everywhere consistently.
I hope so.
We'll see. All right, item 2.2. Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Approve the term sheet to modify the terms of an existing loan between the City of Clearwater and Greenwood Apartments LLC, and to facilitate a change of ownership, debt repayment restructure, and a substantial rehabilitation of Palmetto Park Apartments, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute instruments required to the effect closing of the transfer of the property. Mr. Lane.
Thank you. For this item, I'm joined by Mark Hess of Halkeen Management, Inc. Halkeen Management is the management company for Palmetto Park Apartments, and is also the principal owner of Greenwood Apartments LLC, who is the owner of record of the apartment complex. Mr. Hess flew in from Massachusetts last night. I thank him for being here. Mr. Hess has initiated and led the transaction I'm about to describe, and he's happy to answer any questions you might have of him. Ms. Icy Gully is also with us today. Ms. Gully is the recently retired CEO of the Clearwater Neighborhood Housing Services and still serves as a consultant for them. She had a shorter commute this morning. Her organization has financial interest in Palmetto Park Apartments, and no one knows better than Ms. Gully how important Palmetto Park Apartments is to the North Greenwood community. So Palmetto Park Apartments, formerly known as Greenwood Apartments, is a 179-unit rental housing community that sits right in the heart of the North Greenwood community. This complex, because of its size and location, is critical to the stability of the North Greenwood neighborhood. One of our main priorities in the housing division, as you all know, is to preserve affordable housing, and this is an exciting opportunity to do just that. The complex was built in the 1950s. In 2001, the complex was very much showing its age. I think that's probably an understatement. I think Ms. Gully would tell you that it was in deplorable condition. The city provided a $700,000 loan to the Bank of America Community Development Corporation to purchase and renovate the complex. In 2003, the city contributed an additional $300,000 loan, bringing the total loan amount to $1 million. Funds used at the time were State Housing Initiative Partnership Program funds. Pinellas County and the Pinellas County Housing Finance Authority also invested similarly to the project. I think their total investment combined was $1.15 million, approximately. I would say that this combined investment helped to save the complex from deteriorating to a point where rehabilitation would become less and less feasible as the years passed. High vacancy rates and low rental rates. The city's loan had an 18-year term, and payments to the city were subject to available cash flows. High vacancy rates and low rental rates restricted cash flow to the point where the city didn't receive any payments until well after the loan was restructured in 2012. So in 2012, Bank of America CDC paid off the first mortgage of $3.4 million and sold the property to Greenwood Apartments LLC, again, now currently the owner of the property still. This transaction was in response to the project having considerable financial struggles at the time. Recognizing this, the city agreed to modify its loan terms to help facilitate the transaction. The project, while on better financial footing, still struggled to cash flow enough to pay the city loan. The city didn't receive any payments on its loan until 2018. Currently, the loan balance, including accrued interest, exceeds the city's $1 million investment by about $300,000. So fast forward to today, the owner of the property is planning to sell the apartment complex to an affiliated company, and the sale will allow the new owner to gain nearly $12 million in equity through the sale of tax credits. As a result, the property will benefit from a rehabilitation of about $10.5 million. To help make this a reality, the property owner has requested the city and the county HFA to resubordinate our loans. The county's loan is structured as a zero-interest deferred loan, deferred through 2045. It wasn't necessary for them to subordinate to make this deal happen. So this is a very complex transaction, but the city's role is relatively simple. Nonetheless, we're being asked to defer payment of a loan funded with public funds. So it's important that we make sure every aspect of this deal is appropriate. We hired PRAG, Public Resources Advisory Group. They're a financial consultant. They conducted a financial analysis of the proposal. PRAG has significant experience with this type of deal structure, which is very common throughout the state of Florida. PRAG found the proposal to be appropriate and consistent with similar transactions throughout the state of Florida. So with PRAG's determination, staff is recommending the following. Allow the assignment and assumption of the city's loan by Palmetto Park Preservation Ltd. They are the buyer. We'll restate the debt and modify the loan terms to, one, we'll change the interest rate from the current 3% to the applicable federal rate, which is expected to be 1.9% on the day of closing. The maturity date will be 45 years from closing or payoff of the county loan, whichever occurs first. And a minimum of 89% of the units will be reserved for households at or below 60% of area median income for a period of 45 years from the day of closing. These are much stronger affordability restrictions than currently exist. The city will subordinate our loan with a new lien position as follows. We'll be behind a construction loan of about $20 million through project stabilization, and then we'll be behind permanent financing of about $10.55 million. In terms of receiving payments from cash flow, payments to the developer fee and interest on the seller note will take precedent. According to the project pro forma, the city is not expected to receive a payment until the year 2037. Important to note that the $1 million city loan and the county HFA combined loans of about $1.15 million were funded with funds dedicated for affordable housing programs. This investment really saved the property in 2001. The modification of loan terms in 2012 helped to further extend the useful life of the complex. I expect this transaction to buy maybe another 15 years of useful life, and we could very well see another investment 15 years down the road similar to this that may be incentivized by, once again, the city leaving its money in the deal. So from my perspective, the initial investment was a great use of funds, and this subordination request is an opportunity to leverage that investment. We're able to keep this important complex livable in a decent condition for quite a long time through this one-time investment. So at this time, I'll take any questions you might have. Again, Mr. Hess and Ms. Gully are also here to answer questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lane? Vice Mayor?
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree with you, Chuck. I think keeping our same position basically and allowing this to move forward is the right thing. I mean, I go back a long ways with this apartment complex. When I was in high school, I would take teammates from the basketball team home after practice and drop them off. And the condition of the apartments in those days, as Ms. Gully knows, was deplorable. You had apartments that had the bathroom was upstairs, and you had people living in it that could not get up the stairs, so they had to make other arrangements for human waste and things of that nature. So, you know, the first renovation to it back in 2001 was, long overdue. And I think, a $10 million renovation at this point in time, given that we're with the new North Greenwood CRA getting ready to come on board and everything, I think this just falls right in line with it. And I support this 100%.
I concur exactly with Councilmember Hamilton. It's been around in our community a long time. I remember it when I was a kid, and I've been really glad to see that it was updated, and I think really to carry it on in that tradition is a good thing.
Councilmember Bunker.
Call me naive, but I support it as well. I'm also curious, do we know what the vacancy rate is like now?
I don't know the vacancy rate now. Mr. Hess, are you aware of the vacancy rate?
Please come up to the mic.
Thank you all. Mark Hess, Halkeen. Current vacancy rate, we have about 12 vacant units, and we are not being super aggressive at the leasing right now because in order to accommodate the renovations, you need some swing space to renovate. But the demand for these units especially is 2 and 3 bedroom larger family units, which are really in short supply in this marketplace. The demand is really high for this current resource.
Thank you.
Councilmember Beckman.
Hi, I had a couple of notes. So I think you answered it when you said Mr. Lane, when you said they're going to sell to an affiliated company to get $12 million in tax credits, correct? Right, so that's the part that I wasn't clear on, because one of my questions was, let me see where my thing is here. One of my questions was, how is Palmetto Preservation LTD planning to make a profit? Like, why would they want to come in and purchase this, right? I mean, and so if it's just an affiliated company and they're, whatever they're doing with moving ownership and all that stuff to apply for these tax credits, right? That allows them to rehab it.
Right.
Okay,
The sale of the property is required in order to gain access to the tax credits.
okay. Okay,
Very typical in a deal like this that it's sold to an affiliate corporation.
okay. Which is really just a hoop, right? I mean, it's, right? If it's an affiliated company, why can't they just get the tax credits without having to go through a sale or something? But
That's the way the
okay.
system works.
Yeah.
Make the rules.
Okay. And then, is this a locally owned conglomerate company or
No, I believe they're based out of Massachusetts.
okay, where he came from? Okay. So Greenwood Apartments LLC had ownership for 20 years?
They've owned it since 2012.
Okay. And do they do a good job managing? Are they going to continue to manage?
I think they do. When they took ownership of the property, I think they were a little surprised at the amount of investment they needed to make to bring it, into decent condition at that time, even given the investment was made in 2001.
2001, too.
So I think they've done a nice job.
Okay. And then I think you answered this too, but one of my notes was, is the 89% of units at or below 60% AMI an increase or decrease? You said it's an increase?
It's an increase.
Okay.
Particular increases in the affordability period.
Okay, great. And then what type of improvements are we talking about? And will residents be able to stay in their apartments? I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with voting yes or no, I guess, but I was just curious, like what kind of improvements? Because I've talked to I know a number of residents who live there, and there's, when they contact you, it's usually about crabbing about something. It's not like life is great. But what kind of improvements, and will people be able to stay in those apartments? Do you know?
I'll ask Mark to come up. I know there's some water intrusion issues that they're going to fix, but it is a full-scale renovation.
Okay.
Thank you. We are hiring a firm that's going to help with the management of the residents, because it is sort of stressful undertaking, not just for the residents, but also for the team that's in place. The plan, because we are gutting kitchens and bathrooms and doing whole new HVAC systems, actually renovating the units with the people there just doesn't make sense in terms of protecting the residents and their belongings. The plan, wherever possible, is to renovate units that are similar and then have a family do what we call a one-way move, where they actually move into a different unit that's very similar, that's already been renovated, instead of having to move out and move back or do a hotel or a swing unit in terms of logistics. We see that as the most, not just cost efficient, but also lowest impact and stressful. There are some special circumstances where people may need to move back into the same unit, and in some of those cases, on a case-by-case basis, that can be accommodated. But in general, we're trying to do it once and assist the residents with that move within the
Okay.
complex.
Because we have major renovation going on at like 1200 Missouri, and a number of residents have reached out to me, and it's elderly, and they're upset about construction workers coming in and out and not giving heads up and all that kind of thing. So you're thinking like if you had 8 open units, you're going to work on these 8, get people out of their apartments, put them in the 8 standard ones, do all that renovation, then move them in, and then another set of 8. That's how something like that? That seems good. Seems good. I think that I might have had one. I just had a note. In part of the background, Chuck, it says high vacancy and low rental rates resulted in cash flow insufficient to pay the loan. And I'm thinking, this was like, after 2003, on March, to bring it to loan total. But why weren't people, so 2008, 9, I know we had the recession, but why was the cash flow insufficient if we have subsidized housing with like some guaranteed payments there?
Sure. So when we stepped in 2012 in Florida, although the recovery was happening, it was still not a heady time in Florida in terms of real estate and development. And it was the property, when it was developed originally, they had over-projected what they thought they could support. And, through the recession, that didn't help anything in terms of the property's ability to support the debt that it had. When we were asked if we want to come in and help stabilize the property, and part of what we bring to the table is that we're not just developers, we're also a management company. So we have people, and at the end of the day, it's people that solve these kind of problems and help stabilize communities. We were willing to take it on, but as a condition, we needed Bank of America to pay off some of the debt for us to come in because it was not right sized in the beginning. It did take us longer to stabilize. It was a challenging property when we came in through the transition, and we had to roll a lot of the money that was generated from the property back into improvements to try to stabilize the structure. And then when things started to get a little bit better and more stabilized in 2018, I think that's the first time we were generating cash flow and starting to make distributions. And then we rolled into 2019 and we started to have some mold and moisture issues for some of the units because of the concrete structure and an HVAC system that didn't include fresh air and makeup air and things of that nature. So then we started chasing that in terms of having to roll additional money into the units to address those issues, and we decided that the only really permanent solution is to do a substantial renovation, redo the kitchens, and install new HVAC with, things like bathroom vents and a fresh air makeup air for the HVAC, which was not, done in the original renovation that predated our involvement with the property.
Thank you for that clarification.
Can you tell me a little bit about your company? Do you only do affordable, or do you do
Sure.
market rate too? How many complexes do you manage around the country?
Sure. We're based in Norwood, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston. I've been with the company for 21 years, and we are primarily affordable housing developers and property managers. I would say we're a property management company first. We have about 9,000 units under management. About half of those we have an ownership interest of some sort in, and the other half are for third-party clients. And as we recognize opportunities in the portfolio to refinance and redevelopment, that's what we have. I'm part of a small group that looks at opportunities like in Palmetto, where we have to figure out the next right thing to do for the property. Most of our properties are in New England. We have a few in Maryland and Virginia, North Carolina, and then we have 2 properties that we manage in Florida.
I mean, when these were refurbished, and I think we cut the ribbon on them in '03 when they were really done, but IC probably knows better. They were gutted and then redone. Is this a normal cycle at this point? Or was it not maybe
I would say
done properly by the general contractor?
Well, 15, family housing, it's a hard life, for these units. It's a high intensity kind of use for these typical units. So I wouldn't say that it's an extraordinary result for this particular property, particularly when you're trying to set the property up so that it will last another 15 years, right? You don't want to kind of piecemeal it. You want to do it right. And part of what we're addressing here is things like that aren't easy to do, small scale, like re-engineering the way the fresh air works so you can manage the mold and moisture kind of issues that are that we all know, both professionally and at our homes, that can be hard to stay on top of by having a right-sized HVAC system and makeup air and properly venting bathrooms and things of that nature. Those are things that if they had been done the first time, it would make this renovation a little easier. I think it was just a mistake. I don't think there was any pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. I thought, and in our experience, we came in and we actually had engineers look at the property and we said, well, this property works. We're willing to step in and take it over in 2012. We didn't see a lens where we were going to have to spend $10 million on the property in 8 years, but that's where we are, and we're prepared to do it.
I mean, it's 55 a unit, so it's significant. At the end of 15 years from now, do you think these will just need another reno, or will they have reached the ultimate useful life?
Well, one of the advantages of this property is it was built, its strength and its weakness. It was built in the 50s, and it's built of concrete, which makes the, the thermal mass and the ventilation of the building a challenge in terms of being careful about how you engineer the systems. But also means that the likelihood that these buildings are going to go anywhere is pretty low. It's a pretty solid structure, and it will be something, in my experience, that will be worth renovating again in, in the next 15, 17 years.
All right. Anything else? Consent?
Yeah.
3.1. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Approve a purchase order and agreement with Axon Enterprises, Inc. of Scottsdale, Arizona for the purchase of in-car video equipment and digital evidence storage and management in the amount of $187,200 for a 5-year term ending December 31st, 2026, pursuant to the City Code of Ordinances, Section 2.1, 2.563, 1C, piggyback and authorize the appropriate officials to execute same. Chief Slaughter.
Good morning, Chief Dan Slaughter with the Police Department. This is an item that is going to replace our current issued mobile car camera system. You'll recall back in 2019, we kind of started making the migration to the Axon products, which was the digital evidence management system initially. We did purchase 2 of the Axon Fleet 3 cameras in 2020, kind of to try them out with our DUI units to see the viability of the product, and we're very satisfied with the product. This item is hoping to replace the existing cameras with 15 cameras into our traffic enforcement team and to our patrol vehicles. The camera system is integrates very seamlessly and neatly with the body-worn camera system, the digital evidence management system, and all the other products that we already have with Axon. The prior vendor that we utilized for this product used more of a DVD system to share the data. There was a way to get it into the digital evidence management system, but it's an additional burdensome workflow, and the upload and the sharing of the data was much more complicated. This will make that much more efficient. The pricing is based on the National Purchasing Partners contract, which we are, as a city, a partner with, and it is an initial $37,440 per year for 5 years, which is why it needs to come to the council because of the 5-year agreement being $187,200. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. We did anticipate this expense. We have a normal life cycle for these products, and so this was something we anticipated and have funds available in our police equipment budget code or project code. More than happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Chief Slaughter? Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, I just have a question about, so on the agenda, there are attachments, and, I try to read everything on the agenda and the attachments, but there's this 6th Amendment executed, which is 29 pages, and I see all this stuff on all of your tasers and all of your things that the police department has. I would just make one little request. If what I'm supposed to be looking at related to those Axon cameras could be highlighted, so I don't have to try to look for it. What am I looking for on all these line items?
Sure.
That would be good. But that's just what it's tacked onto,
I mean,
right?
Taser is owned by Axon, right?
Yes, and the challenge with Axon is it's kind of like your cable company dealing with a bunch of bundles.
Okay.
So it's all bundled together, and every time we deal with an item like this, it kind of adjusts the bundle.
Okay.
The only good news is we don't have a phone that you don't need as part of the bundle, but everything else is kind of, that's why you see all that other language. It gets amended and it gets all bundled together to get the bundle pricing.
Okay. But there is some kind of line item that says that these are those cameras that are going to go, right? Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Consent?
Yep.
4.1.
Approve supplemental 1 work order to Cardinal Inc. of Clearwater, Florida to complete expanded ground penetrating radar survey at the St. Matthew's Baptist Church Cemetery in the amount of $48,223, increasing the work order from $87,888 to $136,111 pursuant to the request of qualifications RFQ 26-19, engineer of record consulting services and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. Joe DeSico.
Good morning, council members, Mayor, Mr. Jennings. I'm Joe DeSico, environmental specialist with the engineering department. The archaeological excavation of the property has been completed. The ground truthing has been completed. The work that was approved in February. The final report has been provided to us. During the excavation, active burials were confirmed at the property. The report was sent to representatives of CRUM and the NAACP. They issued a joint letter to us requesting that the city authorize and pay for additional investigation to conclusively define the cemetery boundaries and then to conduct further ground truthing of potential human remains. At this time, Cardinals archaeologists have recommended an expanded GPR survey to fully identify the property boundaries, the cemetery boundaries. And this would be followed by consultation between the city, CRUM, and community members for long-term planning of the property. Any questions?
Questions? Councilmember Beckman?
I have a few questions. So I've read, the St. Matthew's archaeological thing. It's pretty extensive. I don't know how many pages it is. It's a bunch. But I read it back in June. And I know it's attached to our agenda. But I just think it's important for me to understand exactly the sequencing and who's doing what and who's responsible and who paid for what. And I know it's probably in there, but I think it's important that it be on the legislative text when we give a summary, because we've got a summary that starts, according to records from the time the city of Clearwater established a new African-American burial site at the North Greenwood Cemetery, and all burials ceased at the property. Okay, and then the property was sold in 1955 by St. Matthew's Church, and then the next, paragraph starts, then we've got the site was later developed to its current state by CRUM Properties. With the recent rediscovery of lost African-American cemeteries throughout the region, local community leaders called for confirmation that the burials were properly relocated prior to redevelopment. There's no sentence in between there that says, who was relocating and why. So here are a list of my questions that I'd like to be able to have on a legislative text to connect the dots when we're asking for money to further investigate the boundaries of the cemetery, which I have no problem in authorizing money. But, number one, the question is, why did the city need to establish a new African-American cemetery in North Greenwood? And needing to establish a new cemetery does not answer the question of why this one would be disturbed. Wouldn't it just be closed for any new burials? And who was responsible for moving the graves? Who decided on the new site? Who paid to have the graves moved? It's that responsibility. And then originally, I wanted, again, to be able to write it down without looking through all this. Did the city partner here to hire archaeologist Cardno to help determine if graves were present under the CRUM property? So who paid for that initial work? Was it the city exclusively?
The city.
And then if we partnered and paid for that initial work, and then now you're asking for money for us solely to pay for further confirmation. You know what I mean? So I just like those things cleared up, that's all.
Well, I don't think the agenda item's completely correct, because the site was later developed to the current state by CRUM Properties. That is not true.
Because there were interim things, right?
Yes, after we sold the city complex, it was AMR that developed it back in 2000. And then it was later sold, I think, to CRUM in the late 2008, 9, 10. It was during the Great Recession. when property values went down, plus that company was purchased by a Canadian firm whose name escapes me, so maybe Gina remembers. Was it CGI? I think it's CGI. But they were the original. Didn't CGI buy it from AMR and Satish? I can't remember his last name. Anyway, it changed hands. Crum didn't do the development there, so that really isn't completely true. And I think some of the history is that things were treated differently back in the 40s and 50s. And that's not an adequate answer, but that's what happened. And I think the McMullins bought the property, as I recall,
Yeah, I mean, the
from the church.
sequence, yeah, was.
But could we have, a bulleted point sequence of who owned it when, who, who said they were responsible for finding a new burial site in North Greenwood, who was responsible, who signed on the dotted line that says, I'm gonna move these bodies, who paid for moving of the bodies, who confirmed that all the bodies, supposedly confirmed, or whatever. All that stuff, just in a nice, easy, bulleted way, so that there's a real clear, factual-based accounting of a timeline of what happened when and who was responsible.
I will talk to the archaeologists and see if they can put that together.
Okay.
I know that a lot of those records and that information you're asking about it's just not available. It's not.
Well, and that's fine, and if we have,
A lot of gaps missing.
yeah, and if there's we are unable to confirm who paid for this, or who signed on, if we don't have documentation, we don't, but at least it's spelled out there.
There is some language, though, about what happened with the moving, because it was in the minutes of the city council meetings, because Miss Aiken looked at it, so I know we talked about it. Councilmember Bunker?
I'm all for this extra funds here, although we really do need to, at some point, decide who is going to be responsible for what ultimately happens here. How much is the city, how much is perhaps Crum kicking in, or other parties. But that's not what we're dealing with right now. When I was reading over this final report, I found myself very moved by reading the stories of some of the people who may be buried on that property. And I was also struck, because occasionally I read what's given to us. I was also struck in the report about the entries from newspaper stories back in 1954 that talk about how we made decisions as an inducement to confine Negro home building and purchasing to the existing area. We didn't want that spreading out. So, I mean, we do, we weren't on the commission at that time. But, the city does have some responsibility in dealing with this. And I think we all acknowledge that. It's just a matter of finding out, how ultimately this is all going to be paid for. But I'm definitely for moving ahead with this.
Vice Mayor?
I mean, the history and the sequence of events on his property is very difficult to follow in some aspects. In others, it's not. But the city, I don't really have a problem spending this money to really get a final scientific, technological reading of this property. Beyond that, I'm not sure where the city's going to go, because I know the NAACP and I know the Crum Corporation. They're going to look at the city and say, well, if we're going to move these, if they ultimately find and they want to move something, they're going to expect the city to pay for it. The question is, to me, when we don't know with a certain level of certainty who it is we're moving or what it is we're moving, are we better off just leaving it and recognizing the cemetery with a monument of some sort that identifies it? But I'm not sure, and I don't mean this to sound cold and callous, but I'm not sure the city's responsible for it. And I'm not sure we're the ones that should be paying for it. Given the chronological series of events, I just don't know that it's something we need to be on the hook for. There's a part of me that says, the compassion in me says I want to do the right thing, but the other side of it is I'm not sure, I'm not convinced that it really falls on our shoulders. So I'm willing to spend this additional money to get the clearest picture we can possibly have of what it is we're looking at. And then by the time that's done, I won't be sitting in this seat, so it'll be somebody else's decision to make. But we'll see where it goes.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Yeah, and I think you're right. This goes back into a time that there weren't a lot of records on these things. And, Bill Horn, our previous city manager, was really good at getting this moved forward. And I kind of asked a week or two ago where we were with this, because it seemed to kind of drop, from when he was here. But I agree, we need to find the boundaries on this. I don't know if the city, I think what they're going to find, most of the intact graves were moved. The ones that they're finding now, they're not even sure what they are. I mean, at least that's what I remember from some of the discussions with Bill months ago. But we need to find out. I mean, I think some of these maybe even go out into Missouri, because underneath the roadway, that was a dirt road back then when this was a cemetery. It wasn't a defined road. So I think if we find the boundaries and then we talk about what we're going to do to take care of the situation, having scientific boundaries on that would be the first step. So I'm for doing this, and then I'm for future talks on Crum. Some of the, I think the remains were found under their parking lot, and I don't think that they really should be required to move their parking lot to find out exactly what is under there, because it may not be intact graves. They may be just bones of some type that go way back. So I think we need to find the boundaries on this, and then we need to talk about it again. I would be for putting some kind of a plaque or monument there saying this goes back a long time before that, and recognize that this was what it was in the beginning. But that's in future talks, I think. Let's find out what the boundary is and go from there.
All right, we'll have to talk about this further on Thursday. I will have to recuse myself from this one. You have another question?
Can I have clarification, like who paid for the initial ground truthing and investigation that we had?
Sure, there have been 2 levels of investigation
Okay.
so far. One was an initial GPR survey that was paid for by Crum and the NAACP. They did a joint study, and that was done with USF archaeologists. They gave us that information and reports and the findings, and we turned that over to Cardno, who evaluated it and came up with the ground truthing and excavation plan, and we paid for that.
We paid solely for the ground truthing and excavation? Okay. Okay. All right, so it's not such a big stretch to have further, it's just extending the ground truthing but with a electronic, not underground. Right. Okay.
Mr. Jennings?
Thank you, Mayor. 2 weeks ago, I had a conversation with Matt Crum concerning this, and the two of us had a fairly lengthy discussion about the history. And I do think that there is further need for exploration as to who is responsible and ultimately the long term. But I felt as though, after talking with Mr. Crum, this was a continuation of the previous study, hence the reason why we wanted to put it on this agenda.
Councilmember Bunker?
As far as what ultimately we do, I had talked to Bill Horn in one of our weekly meetings about reaching out to find if there are other organizations, other charities that can help in these displaced cemeteries, because this is not unique here in Clearwater. I mean, in Tampa, there's plenty of stories that came before ours, and the same company that's doing our ground truthing rather, was hired by Tulsa to investigate the Tulsa massacre burial sites. I've got to believe there's some other entities out there who are interested in helping make some of these things go right, if ultimately we decide to do more than put a plaque up there. And if that's what the community decides they want to do, I'm fine with that. But we need future conversations about that.
All right, we'll discuss it further on Thursday. 4.2.
Thank you.
Approve the request from the owner of property addressed as 300 Jones Street, Clearwater, to vacate a portion of North Osceola Avenue described as that certain portion of North Osceola Avenue lying west of the west boundary of Block 2, Jones subdivision of Nicholson's addition to Clearwater Harbor as recorded in Plot Book 1, page 13 of the Public Records of Hillsborough County, Florida, of which Pinellas County was formerly a part and lying east of the east boundary of Block 1 of said Jones subdivision of Nicholson's addition to Clearwater Harbor, and lying east of the east boundary of a portion of Lot B, Clovis C. Lutz subdivision, as recorded in Plot Book 35, page 76 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, and pass ordinance 951-6-21 on first reading. Mr. Benwell.
Thank you. Jim Benwell, Engineering Department. In 2007, the city vacated the majority of North Osceola Avenue right-of-way between Jones Street and Georgia Avenue. The reconstructed road was then put in just to the east of that. This vacation is for the remaining portion of the North Osceola Avenue between Jones and Georgia, where the road used to lie. The applicant owns all abutting property around this right-of-way. The city will retain all easements for existing and future utility needs.
Questions? Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah. So you said the all abutting properties are owned by the same entity, and the proposed development will support this vacation. If vacated, this portion will be used as a private drive for new development. Is this single family, multifamily? What, do you have any idea what might go there?
I believe it's multifamily.
Multifamily housing?
So, yeah.
Okay, like a apartment complex?
I would imagine I'd double check the planning department on the actual plans for it.
Okay.
But the use would be for them to have a gated private entryway for their development. I
Okay.
believe there are some residential involved in there. I can double check.
Okay, just wanted to know about how much more housing might be coming. Thank you.
Other questions?
If I was a betting man, given that location, it's probably going to be condos, not apartments.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Item 4.3.
Approve the request from the City of Clearwater vacating public right-of-way described as that certain portion of State Street abutting Lot 11 and Lot 18 of EA Marshall subdivision as recorded in Plat Book 3, page 44 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, and pass ordinance 9517-21 on first reading. Mr. Benwell.
This portion of State Street is a dead-end right-of-way that bisects State Street Park. The Parks and Rec Department would like to vacate this right-of-way to connect the two parts of the park and also put a fence up to prevent some illegal dumping that they've been having some issues with recently.
Questions?
I have a quick,
Councilmember Beckman.
I'm familiar with this park. I've done a number of cleanups and that, I know exactly what dead-end road. So my question, I have two questions. Do we have encampments here as well, back there in that woods, or is it just
I'm
dumping?
not sure of encampments. When I spoke with Parks and Rec, they said their main issue was just constantly having trash and dumping in that area.
Yeah. And then on the aerial map, like where are you thinking of putting the fence? At the end closest to North Betty Lane, or in the middle, or?
I would imagine it would be in that red hatched area that we're going to be vacating. I would imagine it'd be the western extent,
Okay, good, as close as.
as
Yep.
close as possible.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay, that's all thank you.
Mr. Gloucester. Do you have any idea why we are getting dumping here? I mean, with our liberal pickup
I have no idea.
rules, is it,
I've said before that we're victims of our own success. We do very well at what we do at the curbside and our garbage and recycling collections, and people who actually own properties here in the city will bring stuff from their property outside the city to leave it at the curb here.
okay,
So I really have no rhyme or reason for this.
all right. Other questions? 4.4.
Accept a sidewalk easement from Sarah L. Williamson for the construction, installation, and maintenance of a public sidewalk on real property located at 1157 Russell Street, and adopt Resolution 21-35. Mr. Benwell.
This sidewalk easement will grant the city the allowance to construct and maintain a sidewalk on this property. This will be contiguous with the property to the east and also provide a little bit of erosion control on the property.
Questions? All right. 4.5.
Accept the assignment of drainage easement from Pinellas County, a political subdivision of the state of Florida, as recorded in Official Records Book 2780, page 68 of the Public Records of Pinellas County, Florida, for the construction, installation, and maintenance of city drainage facilities on real property located at 2701 Via Cipriani, and adopt Resolution 21-36.
The stormwater ditch is currently being maintained by Pinellas County, with the adjacent property owners and the majority of the contributing area utilizing this ditch and also paying the associated stormwater fees to the city of Clearwater. The city has requested the transfer of this easement from the county to the city.
Questions? Councilmember Beckman.
So the language says for the construction, installation, and maintenance of city drainage facilities. I thought it was just a ditch based on, what it was. Are you going to construct something more than just the ditch that's there?
I don't believe that's the plan right now, but the language in this allows for us to put something in the future if we see fit.
Okay.
So is the water just standing there? If it
Yeah,
overflows, does it go into the bay?
Correct. So right now, the way the stormwater flows, it goes from east to west out to the bay. The ditch wasn't being maintained. It needed to be trimmed, some trash, just normal maintenance for the ditch. And now it'll be our responsibility, so we'll be able to go out and take care of that.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Beckman.
Do we have, is it small enough or the size right for things like those water goats or things to stop trash from going into the bay? I'm sure we do stuff like
Sure,
that.
I can check with our stormwater staff.
Okay.
You all want to touch that, or are you going to just sit back there?
We can explore that. There is an opportunity on that. We just have to make sure anything we put across the ditch doesn't restrict flows when it gets clogged up. So yes, we can take a look. It would be a lot more helpful if people would keep their trash out of the ditch. That would make things a whole lot easier. This is an interesting ditch too. It's very flat. The subdivision on the north side was dredged material back in I don't know, 40s, 50s. So there's really only a foot and a half of fall on this ditch from US 19 out to the bay. So the tide backs up in the ditch, and then the storm water pushes it out, and the water comes back and forth, and there really isn't a constant flow to the east. It works, it keeps the water out of the people's houses, but it's tidally influenced and it's flat.
And do you have the ability to really service this? It looks narrow.
It's challenging. The county serviced it about 3 years ago. We did a joint effort with them, because there's county and city folks that have water going into this feature. So we cleaned it out, and the county recently cleaned it out again. They basically got the debris out. It has plenty of capacity for the water that goes through it. We can and hire somebody. I don't think our guys can get to the mangroves that are out by the mouth. The upstream end we can. The velocities are so low in that, we don't have much hydraulic restriction. So it hasn't been a problem, and we will keep on it. I think it was about 15 years between major cleanings when the county and us partnered about 3 years ago on it.
Okay. Councilmember Beckman?
So I sit on the Tampa Bay Estuary Program Board, so they're all about the bay and keeping it clean. So maybe I could ask them if they have any ideas, but is this ditch area accessible by residents to adopt it, to try to keep it clean?
I believe it is. The Grand Bellagio, if memory serves me, owns to their property, which is on the south side, and they own all the way to the north bank. But what's the park on the north side called?
Aristocrat.
Bay Aristocrat.
Yeah.
Their buildings all back up to the top of the bank on the ditch. So whether they legally have a right to go down the ditch, I'm not sure, but I think if they were going to pick up debris, I don't think anybody would give them a hard time.
Is it safe?
It's pretty. The slopes on the north side are pretty shallow. So yes, I think that side is safe. The other side is a little steeper.
And no
So-
chain link fence that keeps people out
Yeah.
of getting in there to get trash out.
There's no fence there, is there? No.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
This 30-foot easement is entirely on Grand Bellagio's property. The Aristocrat is just.
Is Grand Bellagio in our city limits incorporated?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's that project that had the development
Oh,
agreement that we
okay,
broke.
like oh, that's right. Mhm. Yep.
Any
Okay,
other questions? All right,
thanks.
well,
Yes.
hear that again on Thursday, 5.1.
Authorize one Pierce heavy-duty velocity pumper, G2611, previously authorized to surplus, to temporarily remain in fleet reserve, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. Chief Elders.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, Scott Ellis, Fire Chief, Clearwater Fire and Rescue. This item before you is to request the approval to keep reserve engine G2611 previously authorized for surplus. Approximately a year ago, with the approval of the purchase of 2 new engines, the request had us turning in 2 reserves once they were delivered for surplus. We normally maintain a reserve status of 5 engines to facilitate maintenance for our frontline apparatus. Over the past several months, the supply chain issues affecting the country has delayed many of our units being out of service for months, in which depleted our available engines in reserve to 1. Some examples of that: we've had units out of service for 4 and 5 months waiting on parts. Nothing, it's just really basically for the supply chain issues. For example, also, we currently have a reserve ladder that's been out for several months due to a wiring harness, and a frontline rescue that's been out for over 4 months waiting on sensors from Ford. This request is to keep reserve G2611 for the time being as we work through the supply chain issues, allowing manufacturers time to catch up on the demands. The other reserve engine, which was G2610, has already been turned in for surplus. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Chief Ellers? Councilmember Beckman.
Yeah, I had a question, you might have answered it, but why do we have an increase in out-of-service hours for our frontline newer fire trucks? And are you saying that it's just kind of glitchy things like a fuse or something and it's supply chain? It's not that, because if they're newer, they shouldn't be having problems.
Yes, ma'am, but just like a regular vehicle, it's got to go back because of some small electronic
Yeah.
sensor that everything is computerized anymore. And then that's the supply chain issue on those
Okay.
aspects.
Thanks.
Consent?
Yep.
Yes.
5.2.
Authorize a purchase order to Municipal Emergency Services, MES, of Pinellas Park, Florida, for personal protection equipment for Clearwater Fire and Rescue personnel in the amount not to exceed $200,000 for the term November 29th, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.563. Piggyback and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. Chief Ellers.
This item before you is request approval for the purchase of personal protective equipment for our personnel, which includes coats and pants. This is really what that is focusing on, not the other garb. The previous company providing these items has not been able to meet the standards of our department. We were with one manufacturer, and it wasn't meeting a lot of the standards that we needed, so we needed to switch. The request is to authorize and not to exceed amount of $200,000 to Municipal Emergency Services of Pinellas Park for the replacement of the bunker gear as well as for new hires. This dollar figure will provide the needed funds until June 30th of 2022 when a new RFQ will be presented for companies to bid on. Funds are available in for this item in the CIP budget 315-91261, and additionally Pinellas County provides approximately 11.36%, which is the amount of reimbursement for that, which is about the percentage of the unincorporated county that we cover for them. With that, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Questions for Chief Ellers? Councilmember Beckman.
So I just wanted to understand, the gear has a 10-year shelf life, and currently Clearwater Fire and Rescue issues one set of gear and then a second set 5 years later. So I had a couple, does it mean shelf life, like they wear that one set of gear for 5 years and then they dispose of it and get their new? Or does something sit on a shelf and it'll only last because of?
No, the way we've been replacing it is that gear is for 5 years, and then at that 5-year mark, they get a new set of gear. That gear that they had goes on the shelf for the remaining 5 years, and then once it's reached its 10-year shelf life, we have to, keep up with the standard and move to a new gear. So it's just a rotating new set of gear online in a 5-year increments.
So they wear the gear for 5 years, and then they stick it on the shelf and don't touch it for 5 years?
No, they use the second set of gear is so when they come back from an incident and they have all those carcinogens on that gear, it has to be washed and cleaned, which we have the facility to do that. But they need that gear on the shelf to be able to get back in service.
Okay. And that gear is tailored to each
That is,
firefighter?
that is correct, but also gender-based as well.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
And I think people need to understand, if I'm reading this correctly, basically, one set of gear for one firefighter is about $4,000.
That's correct.
That's just for the coat and the pants.
Just coat and pants, not including helmet, hood, gloves, boots.
This isn't something you can walk into a department store and pick up. This is highly specialized, highly specialized gear, so.
Consent?
Yes.
5.3.
Authorize a purchase order to 10-8 Fire and Equipment, Inc. of Bradenton, Florida for one Osage Warrior Type 1 Rescue 2022 Ford F-450 extended cab chassis in the amount of $219,850 pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.563. Piggyback in Section 2.563, non-competitive purchase, authorize the surplus of G3869, a 2010 Ford F650 pursuant to the Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.623, public auction or trade-in, whichever is the best interest of the city, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. Chief Ellers.
This item before you is request approval for the purchase of one Osage ALS Transport Rescue Unit on a Ford F-450 chassis in the amount of $219,850 with 10-8 fire equipment. This provides replacement for one reserve ALS transport vehicle, Vehicle 3869, which has met its useful life in service. Because of our ALS contract with Pinellas County, the vehicle is fully reimbursed by county dollars. As a reminder, We maintain a fleet of 3 ALS transport vehicles in frontline services. That's Rescue 46 on the beach, Rescue 48 centrally located on Belcher, and Rescue 49 over there on the east side by the causeway. The other two, Medic 45 and 47, are in suburban type vehicles, which was an initiative we started approximately 6 years ago to cut down on fuel costs, vehicle costs, and also the lower emissions. This has proven worthwhile for those 2 units. However, we maintain those other transport vehicles in areas which need the capability for times Sunstar is delayed to facilitate the best for the patient. Additionally, earlier this year, our transport units became very critical as we saw crisis and ambulance delays at the hospitals. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Chief Ellers? Councilmember Beckman.
Did you look at any EV options for this type of vehicle?
I apologize.
Have you looked at EV options for this type of vehicle?
We always, you're talking about the electric vehicle aspect. The chassis that we're using, just like our larger trucks, they're just not available for them yet. We always continue to look at that, but on these vehicles, we just have not. Ford or Chevy, GM is just starting into that process from our understanding.
Okay, so they're not available right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Councilmember Bunker.
I'm just interested in why garage charges for the new vehicle would be expected to be less than the vehicle being retired. Is that just like repair charges or?
Yeah, so they should have a warranty on the first,
Okay.
the first several years on
I got you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Consent?
Yep.
6.1. Thanks, Chief.
Ratify and confirm purchase orders to Garland DBS Inc. of Cleveland, Ohio for roof replacement at Fire Station 49 and the gymnasium roof at the Countryside Recreation Center in the cumulative amount of $784,328, which includes a 5% contingency to include fixed points for solar-ready installation and any other unforeseen site conditions. Pursuant to Clearwater Code of Ordinances 2563, piggyback and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, Brian Johnson, Assistant Director of Solid Waste General Services. Mr. Mayor, Council, the item before you provides for the replacement of the roof on Fire Station 49 and the gym at Countryside Rec Center. Both have reached the end of their useful lives and are consuming considerable resources to maintain in a losing battle against the elements. Both projects are important to mitigate safety concerns and to protect the integrity of the buildings. This item is being brought to you as a ratify and confirm in order to avoid the 20% increase in the cost of both projects, which was due to take effect earlier this month, saving the city approximately $150,000. It also avoids the full impact of supply chain delays, which could push our project start date out to June or July instead of December 27th. I'm available for questions.
Questions? Councilmember Beckman.
I appreciate you having solar-ready construction on these 2 new roofs. Why not go one more step and have solar configured in the price as we go forward and plan for it now? Is that just a decision we need to make later, or?
Yes, because that would piecemeal the solar project if we were to go forward with these 2 roofs without looking at the city-wide impact of installing solar.
That's right, because we haven't got the 10 buildings that are most conducive to.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's what we're waiting for?
So that's what we're waiting
Okay.
for, and the buildings will be ready and configured when we have that information available.
Do you know when we're, like a projected time to get that study information on the 10?
I do not, but
Okay.
we can get that, and I'll defer to Sheridan on that one.
Okay. Well, great. I'm glad it's going to be solar ready. So when you make it solar ready, is that just the electrical? Because you don't know the size of the panels, the configuration of the panels?
No, it's primarily the installation points. So that, I'm sure you've heard concerns about penetrating existing roofs to add solar. So when you make it solar ready, you put those connection points on as a part of the construction. So you don't have that later concern of penetrating the roof and potentially violating a warranty.
Okay, thanks.
What are the cost of those fixed points?
I don't have that itemized out. It's included in the number that was just given to you as a part of the project, but it did increase the cost of it, and I can get that for you if you'd like.
I'd like that.
Okay.
And then for 49, having the panels on, we talked about with the new substation out in Countryside. What is 49 built to as far as hurricane standards? And will this potentially undermine it?
It should not. I'll confirm that for you and get back to you on that, but it should still be Cat 4 ready. Mr. Gloucester, do you know that for sure? Yes, it is Cat 4 ready.
Okay. And it doesn't undermine it?
No.
I mean, it's not Cat 5.
Yeah, it's not a Cat 5 building, it's Cat 4
Okay.
building.
All right. Well, if you get that information, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Yes, Councilmember
So,
Beck.
so when you say a 5% contingency has been added for unforeseen site conditions and for the additional cost to install fixed points for solar-ready installation, for a total of, it's $446,000. So you're asking is a breakdown, which part is for the
Correct.
solar-ready and which part is for contingencies? Okay.
Yeah, I want a line item. I'm just curious
Okay, thanks.
what the delta is. Mr. Maxwell?
It appears that it's around $2,396 is what it shows in the agenda item on one of the invoices.
Okay.
For the rec center or both?
That's for the rec center.
Rec center.
Councilmember Albritton?
Yeah, I did read the description of it, and they were adding 2x4s underneath for support and some other things, so I think that's all basically what it is. It's just getting it strengthened.
Other questions? Consent?
Yes.
6.2.
Approve a purchase order to Communications International of Vero Beach, Florida in the amount of $2,564,944.35 for the purchase of 283XL-185P 50XL-200P portable radios and 265XL-185M mobile radios for the Clearwater Police Department, replacing the current M7300s and the P7300s radios pursuant to the Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.563, single source authorized lease purchase under the city's master lease purchase agreement of internal financing via the interfund loan from the Capital Improvement Fund. Whichever is deemed to be in the city's best interest, authorize the surplus of L3 Harris P7300 and M7300 radios pursuant to the Clearwater Code of Ordinances, Section 2.623, trade in and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same. Mr. Gloucester.
Good morning, Earl Gloucester, Director Solid Waste General Services. This item is to replace roughly 600 police radios that have been in use since the 2008-2009 timeframe. We stepped out and leaned forward and got these radios early for the police department to be able to support the 2012 Republican National Convention in Tampa. And they've been in service, like I said, roughly since 2008-2009. They were P25 ready when we purchased them. So we were leaning forward to get these radios to be able to communicate with everybody in the Bay Area during that time for that event. They've actually gone past their useful life. It's really tough trying to source parts for these radios at this point. So the original plan was to phase it in over a 3-year period. We're now asking to do that all at once. And we realized substantial savings, as you can see at the bottom of the summary, in doing that. On us installation parts, the whole nine. So, questions?
Questions, Councilmember Albritton?
Okay, under the, I was just curious to see the old radios, you got 333 trade-ins, they're giving you $500 for those radios. And then I guess the 265 was the trade-in, or those are the ones that are actually mounted in the police cars or whatever.
Mobiles,
Yeah,
yes.
mobile. And they're also $500. I tried to find, because I know sometimes you can get on the market, selling to like third world countries, they will pay more for it than what a trade-in value is. But has that been looked at? I mean, I tried to find it, and I was finding things a lot less than $500. So
No, we didn't explore going out to the market ourselves with these. We have a relationship with Communications International. It just was a benefit to us and efficiency just to be able to trade them in, get the installation, get the discount, and keep moving.
Okay. And are these radios, do they have more functionality than the old ones?
The newer radios, yes, sir, they do. A lot more functionality. The police, they field tested them over a year ago, I think now. They field tested them. They really like this radio, and they're ready to go move out on it.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Mayor?
And these radios are compatible with neighboring law enforcement?
Yes, sir, they're P25 compliant.
So we're all
on the P25, everybody can talk to everybody.
Yeah, there we go.
Councilmember Beckman?
Thank you so much for the paragraph that outlines all the savings if we go ahead and do this. So that was nice to have that spelled out. And then I was just wondering, why wasn't this under the police department agenda?
Well, we maintain the radios under the General Services Department,
Okay,
so
that's,
it
okay,
was a toss-up. Our turn to present.
thanks.
But we are committed to having to use Harris, right?
Yes, sir, we
Because
are.
of the system that
Because
we're
of the
on.
system that we're on. Yes, sir.
Maycom sold to them.
Maycom sold to Harris, yes.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Albritton?
Yeah, just one other question. Under the assumptions, there's a note here that says if the replacement antenna is required, the city will perform and replace services. So is that something that we may have to do, is replace the antenna? Is it
Antennas on the radios?
No, I think this is the, I don't know if this is the individual antennas. Was it a main antenna that's located like
We have two antennas. We actually have two antenna sites, main tower sites.
Okay.
One on Friend Avenue, the south end of the city, and then one at the, up on the north end of the city at the northeast plant on that property.
Okay,
So
but they've been
two main antenna sites, two main tower sites.
and their function, obviously they function with the new radios.
Absolutely. The work has been done at the two tower sites. We're P25 compliant, have been for several years now. So these radios will come right in and work with our system.
Okay, thank you.
Consent?
Yep.
6.3. I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses with me. 7.1.
Approve the proposed second amendment to an existing development agreement between the City of Clearwater and 411 ES LLC, which provides for certain changes to the conceptual site plan and elevations, increases the overall number of hotel units and height proposed for the subject site, adopt resolution 21-26, and authorize the appropriate officials to execute the same.
Good morning, Gina Clayton, Planning and Development Department. This is the second amendment to an existing hotel agreement, and it was on your agenda last time because you're required by state to have 2 public hearings on development agreements. No changes have been brought forward since the time of your last hearing. Just to give you a quick recap, if you notice on the screen, there's the site. It is over 1 acre in area and expands both sides of East Shore Drive. It's in the Marina District, Beach by Design. There are essentially 4 changes in this development agreement. First, it would increase the number of hotel units from 74 to 91 through the TDR process at the Community Development Board, and it would increase the height from 65 feet to 80. Beach by Design provides for height bonuses if you consolidate land, and if you get to 1 acre and you're located on both sides of East Shore, you can go up to 80 feet in height. That is the maximum for this particular character district. One of the key requirements is if you access this height bonus, you're required to build a publicly accessible boardwalk. And you can see here in gray, we're going to get over 300 feet in publicly accessible boardwalk. There's some minor changes with the mix of docks, and there is some increase in parking to accommodate the additional uses and changes in the mix of docks. So with that, it appears to be generally consistent with Beach by Design, and we're recommending approval.
Questions for Ms. Clayton? We'll hear it again on Thursday.
Thank you.
8.1.
Reappoint Marita Lynch to the Environmental Advisory Board with a term to expire December 31st, 2025. Council members, in your agenda pack, you have information about her appointment. She was serving in an unexpired term and is eligible for and willing to serve again.
I think she's done a good job. Everyone comfortable?
Yep.
Reappointment?
Yes.
Consent? 8.2.
Appoint one member to the Neighborhood and Affordable Housing Advisory Board as a citizen who resides within the city of Clearwater with a term to expire November 30, 2025. Council members, in your agenda pack, we have the current member, Carmen Santiago, who is interested in serving again on the board. And we also have applications for Melissa Colley, Dina Stanley, and Nicholas West for your consideration.
Questions? Comments?
Normally reappoint.
Councilmember Beckman?
I know we normally reappoint, and this is a little difficult because I do know Carmen, and she's a very nice person. However, she has had 3 absences in the last year. And I will tell you, when I attend the meetings, she's not commenting a lot. And so I think we should consider one of the other applicants. In looking at them, I know Melissa Coley. I know that she is very engaged in the community. She lives in North Greenwood. She runs a daycare. She deals with parents who are on limited incomes. And I know that she leads the youth council with the NAACP, and she speaks up. I mean, she uses her voice. And so I think she would be a good addition. But it is tough when somebody wants to be reappointed, but, there is an attendance, and, at the meetings that I do attend, there hasn't been a lot of participation.
Councilmember Bunker?
If we're not comfortable in reappointing, I am fine with Melissa or Dina, but I'd be happy with Melissa.
I guess
Vice Mayor?
my question is, have we spoke with Carmen about her attendance?
Yes, the board liaison did speak with Ms. Santiago. So of recent, I don't believe there has been an issue, but this was more towards the beginning. But it is a board that does meet monthly and regularly, so.
And I know it's easy to use as an excuse, but was COVID a big reason for some
I don't think
meetings?
so.
Or
I think it was just scheduling.
okay, but it has not been
Of late, no.
it's not been an issue. I would lean towards reappointing Carmen with the understanding that if she's not able to attend, if she is not able to attend or her attendance comes into question, we have the ability to ask her to step down, correct?
If she is unable to attend, the board liaison will inform me, and per council policy, then I would approach Mr. Jennings about asking her to resign.
Okay. I would be comfortable taking that path.
Councilmember Albritton?
Yeah, I kind of agree. If it was something that's not as of late, if it started out with her being, missing some meetings, but she hadn't lately, I really appreciate people that go out for these boards, because that's probably their first, it's something they want to give back to their community, and I don't really want to, I know we're talking about it on the dais up here in front of the public, and I think that message will get sent, but I think I would reappoint her, because I just think she's made the effort to be on a board, and I appreciate that.
All right, well, Councilmember Beckman?
I think part of our understanding is when I attend advisory boards, again, I'll let you know. First of all, this is a difficult one because it's at 9 a.m. And a lot of work, and Carmen works. Melissa Coley runs a daycare. She's working. She has people full-time employees that are there, I'm assuming, would take over. But it's tough to get here. I get that. But when you're here, you need to be actively engaged. And a number of the advisory boards that I am sitting out there, people are on this dais and they don't open their mouth. I'm just telling you, that's what happens.
Well, we're not here
And
to
so attendance is one factor, but actually engaging, participating, contributing is another part of serving on the board.
We're not here having the discussion about advisory boards in general, but I do want to ask you one question, because I have a very strong feeling about it. I believe a council member sitting in the audience during an advisory board meeting inhibits interaction amongst the board, because they are here to advise us as a council, and your physical presence in the audience can act as an inhibiting factor towards that interaction. And I believe that. I know you don't believe that, and that's why you come to them. But I do believe that when there's a council member sitting in the audience during that, I think it inhibits participation from the dais to certain people. And that's a discussion for another day, but that's my opinion.
We have that discussion forthcoming, so
Yeah.
I don't really want to litigate that today. Ms. Cole?
Council, what I can do is I'll reach out to Ms. Santiago and confirm that the timing of the meeting is not an issue, that she is able to commit to it, even though applicants are aware of the meeting schedule beforehand. And then if she is unable, I'll report that back. So how about we not put this on consent and bring it back?
I wasn't going to put it on consent. So 8.3.
Appoint one member to the Environmental Advisory Board to fill the remainder of an unexpired term through September 30, 2022. Council members, in your agenda pack, you had applications for Erica Escamilla, Dina Stanley, Sheila Sullivan, Nicholas West, and Dagmar Ortiz. Mr. Wright had to resign from the board, and that was because of his work commitments. He was unable to make the meeting, no longer be able to make the meeting time.
Ms. Sullivan seemed to be the obvious choice to me.
She was the
Agree
one,
to that.
yeah.
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 Consent?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on second readings? Hearing none. Anything else from Mr. Jennings at this time?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to remind the council, you and the council and the public, that tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. at Station Square, we will have the tree lighting. And the Parks and Recreation Department has put a lot of time and effort into this, and we hope that many people will come out for tomorrow evening.
Mr. Margolis, anything?
Hope everyone had a very good Thanksgiving. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, we've got one discussion item. I'm going to take a recess, and then we'll come back and complete that. We'll reconvene the work session for November 29th, 2021. Council discussion item 12.1, Church of Scientology, Councilmember Bunker.
Thank you. I have a few notes written up here that I think will take me about 8 minutes to stumble through. And I hope that you give me a chance to discuss this before we open the floor. I am working on 3 hours of sleep, and in Scientology terms, that would mean I'm unsessionable. I would not be able to hold on to the e-meter cans and be audited. But I'm going to work through that and get this rolling here. Since our last meeting, Tracy McManus broke another huge story in the Tampa Bay Times. Since July 2019, 8 limited liability companies managed or operated by members of Scientology have bought 45 properties in North Marina. $11.8 million in cash was used to buy these properties again, and no signs of developments for any of the properties, just as what happened with the properties purchased downtown. In the article, the mayor said he was concerned, and I'm sure we all are, because this is not a normal way of doing business. But when it comes to Scientology, there is not really a normal. I think it's important for you to understand the most important policy letter in Scientology, which is KSW, Keeping Scientology Working. And in this, L. Ron Hubbard wrote, "We're not playing some minor game in Scientology. It isn't cute or something to do for a lack of something better. The whole agonized future of this planet, every man, woman, and child on it, and your own destiny for the next endless trillions of years depend on what you do here and now with and in Scientology." And this, by the way, you study this at the beginning of every course you pay for, from the $40 communication entry course all the way up to OT8, where you learn how to control matter, energy, space, and time. So this is serious business. And why do I bring it up? Well, it's to explain how things that don't seem rational to us may seem a little bit different to a hardcore Scientologist. It explains how 11 top Scientologists, including L. Ron Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue, went to prison back in the late 70s for crimes against the federal government and the Clearwater government just a few years after they snuck into town here. Now, KSW, Keeping Scientology Working. I mean, that's what all of this is about. In Scientology, I mean, is Scientology behind all the purchases here since 2017, after Miscavige cut all communications with the city? Well, we don't know that. But it sure fits a pattern on how Scientology behaves, and how it's routinely behaved when Miscavige wants to accomplish something. In 1993, after years of fighting the IRS and what Miscavige declared a war, suddenly hundreds of Scientologists in a week filed individual lawsuits against the IRS, bringing the IRS to its knees. Did Scientology and Miscavige coordinate that effort? We don't know. But we do know that when he sat down with the IRS commissioner, Miscavige was the one who could wave his hands and make all of those lawsuits disappear. So, chance it's coordinated. And a few years later, Miscavige used the same tactics to destroy the Cult Awareness Network, which was a small organization, I think based in Chicago, where parents who were concerned about their kids becoming part of what could be called a destructive organization would call for help. And Scientology set out to destroy that. They had one of their Scientology attorneys, Kendrick Moxon, who, by the way, was an unindicted co-conspirator in the crimes that sent all these 11 Scientologists to prison. So Kendrick Moxon found a member of a Christian-based cult and said, hey, I'll do your case for you for free. It's on me. And he took down the Cult Awareness Network with that. And it helped that at the same time, hundreds of Scientologists all together launched individual lawsuits against the Cult Awareness Network, forcing them into bankruptcy. And once CAN was in bankruptcy, another Scientologist popped up and said, yep, look, I'll buy the remains of it. And then he took those and turned it over to Scientology. Now when parents who call the Cult Awareness Network, they get a Scientologist who answers the phone. KSW. So there's a pattern here. No Scientologists think that they're doing anything wrong because KSW is the most ethical thing you can do by Scientology's twisted definition of ethics. And to show you what a small world it is, that Scientologist who bought up the Cult Awareness Network and turned it over to Scientology, he's listed as one of the one manager of 7 of the LLCs used to secretly buy all these North Marina properties. His name is Stephen Hayes, and I'm not saying that he's done anything illegal. I'm just noting a pattern that may be of importance. And speaking of unindicted co-conspirators, in the case of Mary Sue Hubbard, the U.S. versus Mary Sue Hubbard, there was a person from Scientology's Guardian's office, that was the dirty tricks department in Scientology, who tried to stop a key figure in those crimes, Michael Meisner, from talking to the feds. This unindicted co-conspirator went to Meisner's apartment and brought along a couple of goons who stood guard. They were told to stand guard outside this guy's apartment, so Meisner couldn't go to the feds. A couple days later, this unindicted co-conspirator comes back and orders the guards to handcuff Meisner behind his back, put a gag in his mouth, and drag him to a vehicle and take him to an undisclosed location. And unfortunately for Scientology, Meisner did manage to escape after that and went straight to the feds, and that's what brought down Scientology's leadership at the time and led to the raids on Scientology headquarters that exposed all the criminal activities that they had been involved with, including here in Clearwater. So this unindicted co-conspirator isn't named as a manager on any of these LLCs. But he did sign and file a notice of commencement for some roof work done on one of these buildings. Again, I'm not suggesting that unindicted co-conspirator Brian Andrus did anything illegal or improper. In fact, he's done the right thing by actually developing the high-end condo complex Marina Bay 880 in that area. And if Scientologists buy property and put it to use, that's great. I can support that. There are businesses, successful businesses downtown that are owned in buildings that are owned by Scientologists, and they lease out space to folks who aren't. And that's the way it should be. I have no problem with that. Although a few days ago, I stopped into Downtown Pizza, and I did run into a couple of guys who told me that they tried to open up a business on the 500 block of Cleveland, and the Scientologist owner of that building would not give them a long-term lease. He wanted month to month only. And these folks said, I'm supposed to sink $100,000 into fixing up the joint, and I don't have any guarantee that I'm going to be able to stay here for a while. So in that way, we have to ask more of these owners. We have to ask what their plans are, and we have to ask them to be better stewards of the properties that they own. I don't think that's asking too much. You know, by the way, I mentioned Marina Bay 880. Scientology 880 is a book by L. Ron Hubbard, and I'd be happy to loan you a copy if you'd like to read it. But I'm hoping that we can turn to people like Brian Andrus and Stu Schauerman, one of his close friends. I heard him talking about their time together on a podcast the other day. I hope we can urge these people to be open and honest about their plans, because we really do need to understand what the hell is going on here. We also have an elected official sitting on the Downtown Development Board who was the real estate broker in 38 of these North Marina properties that list her husband as the LLC manager. And surely we should expect Terry Nowitzki to have Clearwater's best interests in mind and help us understand what the hell is going on. You know, we need to keep Clearwater working. And I hope that we, with our new city manager and our new city attorney, I hope we continue seriously thinking about ways we can deal with this unorthodox situation. And I will rest my case.
Any questions for Councilmember Bunker? Vice Mayor?
I appreciate the historical background, although I was aware of almost all of that. But other than trying to get people who bought properties to tell us what they're going to do with it, what else do you think we should be doing? I mean,
well, I think we should be encouraging, you know, our team here in Clearwater to be reaching out to the state attorney and the federal government and see if maybe there could be a grand jury started to investigate some of these things. If not the purchasing of property, then any of the other number of illegal things that Scientology conducts here constantly. You know, all the Sea Org members, a lot of them are brought over here on overseas work visas, and their visas have been historically taken from them and held by Scientology, making it a little difficult for them to leave if they want to. And that's just one of the controlling issues that Scientology uses. I mean, if you want to invest human trafficking, well, there's a place to start. Or elder abuse. Attorney Graham Barry has been successfully taking clients to court who have been, as elders, abused by Scientology's sales tactics, where they use these high-pressure tactics that a Scientologist will come to their home and say, oh, I'll help you open up credit cards. And they'll get on the phone with the credit card companies, open up an account, and then say, hey, we need to boost this amount. We need to put more on that. And they get the approval, and then immediately the Scientologist charges all their Scientology programs to these folks' cards. And they have an income of like $30,000 a year. The Scientologist was saying it's $300,000 a year income. So this is fraudulent credit card use that is routine and it really should be looked at. So I think we should consider this not as it's a church in the area. Many people consider it organized crime, and I don't think that's a stretch. If the mob said, we're a religion and guns are religious artifacts, they probably wouldn't get away with it for too long. But if you can convince a court, as L. Ron Hubbard put it back in 1953 when he asked, how's the religion angle coming? If we can get it approved, I know I can make it stick. Well, he's done that. But they didn't have a tax-exempt status fully until '93 with the war against the IRS. And I'm personally going to be continuing to work to see if we can convince the IRS to reopen that case and fix that that situation. I mean,
I guess my question though, Mark, is what you say, I don't disagree with what you say. Would I love the IRS to come down here and take a look at it again and just verify that the standing they gave them in '93 still exists and still applies?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's great. But I can't say without a fact, because there's a lot of people that have screamed about Scientology and all that. I can't say with 100% certainty that they haven't already been here to do that. Can you? I mean, the IRS doesn't fly in on an airplane towing a banner that says, "Here we come."
Yeah, I don't
Nor
think
does the FBI when they do an investigation. So I can't say with 100% certainty that it hasn't already happened.
Yeah, but it might be nice for us to be proactive and ask about it.
So,
And I've been asked, is there a ask of the staff? When I put this on the agenda. Well, if I move to say, hey, can we have staff reach out to federal and state agencies to help us out here? I'm sure it's going to be like last time. Well, it will be 4 against 1, or 3 against 1. Sorry. So I'm not sure that that's effective, but I wanted to open up a conversation so we can have more input. If people want to come on Thursday and talk about this, that's fine. If Scientologists want to come and talk about this, I'd be happy to have that happen. But for us to just sit back and go, well, they bought more property and there's nothing we can do about it. It's not illegal. Well, no, maybe it isn't illegal, but maybe there is some collusion here with Scientology that we're not aware of that maybe does run afoul of the law in some way, but we're not asking anybody to check into that. And I'm personally trying to do some of that stuff myself. I mean, I haven't launched the website yet, but I bought a website, domain Tax Scientology Now, and I'll be putting up a site urging people to contact their representatives and seek some hearings, because the public education on Scientology, the awareness now is so high after Going Clear and Leah Remini's Scientology in the Aftermath, and the dozens of books that have been written by Pulitzer Prize winning journalists and former members. There's lots of information that people on the street know now. I mean, John Oliver on Last Week Tonight can just say, "Where's Shelley? Where's Shelley, David Miscavige?" And people in the audience know what he's talking about and laugh. So there's a high level of interest within the public, and they look at us going, I guess we can't do anything. Well, we should at least try, is what I'm suggesting.
Councilmember Albrecht?
Mark, we get criticized up here by you and other ex-Scientologists that we're scared of Scientology, we don't want to ask any questions or do anything, and that's just not true. I'm not scared at all of Scientology, but I have to have something in my hand to say, yes, they've actually done something illegal to act on it. All your stories you've said, I've heard a million times before. But nobody's given me a list saying, okay, here it is right here. Here's where they've broken the law. There's 10 things right here. If I had that, that'd be the first thing I'd do is write a letter to the FBI or whatever. I'd ask you all to, let's go ahead and get this done. But buying property is not illegal. We don't like it. I think the way that I think about that is, they're doing, I don't agree with what they're doing, but as long as they keep their properties up, there's nothing we can do about it. Except try to think how legally we can make downtown vibrant, even with their properties owned. Now, Brian Andrus is a good example. He's a developer, as with some of the other developers that have made some really nice things when they buy properties. Sure. But I realize that a lot of people have overpaid for properties, and they've bought them, and they're sitting on them doing nothing because that's what they've been told to do. I know that. Because nobody buys a property, overpays for it, and doesn't get a return on it somehow right away. So, if you could tell me, now you've been on council now for 2 years, you know, come to us and say, here's proof right here, what they're doing that's illegal, besides just all the stuff that we hear about that we don't like, but they're doing it because it's legal. I don't think we have any leg to stand on. Now, we've talked to Pam Aiken about it, and I haven't talked to David Morgales about it, but he's going to be involved with our conversations every week we have. Unless there's something that we can do that's viable, I don't think there's anything that we can do as a council. I mean, you might not like the Catholic Church. Let's go after them. They own a lot of property. I mean, you know, they are deemed a religion. I don't agree that they are, but they've been deemed that by the government. And as you said, they sued and brought down the IRS. So obviously they made an impact with the federal government. And if you don't think the federal government's already investigating them, that's not, I mean, that's just something that, you know, we got a guy running for council that says, if I get on council, and he's telling people this, I'm going to get council to write the FBI and tell them to investigate, which is, to me, that's so ludicrous, because what's he going to tell them to investigate? We're here. You can't have them investigate something unless you have cause. So, and we are here representing everybody, whether we like it or not. And I tell my people that, and I'm firm on that. Just because I don't like what they're doing doesn't mean that I agree with it, or if there's anything I can do. Now, what I can do is figure out how I can work around them to get downtown vibrant. Maybe there's some things we can do, and I've talked to John and I've talked to David about it. I think we can maybe change some codes and bring things in to bring people downtown in front of their buildings that are empty. And that's something I'd like to keep looking into and seeing if we can do that. But there's nothing we can do to get around the law on this unless you can tell me, unless you can bring me something on paper saying here's what they've done more than just stories, then we can act on it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And I'm not scared of Scientology. I've heard you say that, and I've heard the guy running for council say that. They're scared. Oh, they don't want to even mention Scientology. That's not true. But we have a job here, and we're going to do our job, and we're going to keep it legal. So I would say let's go ahead and figure how to fix things without their help, because I haven't seen any help since I've been on council.
So, and I don't think we'll see any help from Scientology in the future, but things may change after 45 some years. But at any rate, in some of the videos that I've done with Aaron Smith-Levin, who is running for a seat here, I do say no one's afraid of Scientology sitting up here. I may have said that earlier, but now I say no one is paid off by Scientology. Nobody's in Scientology's pocket. It's none of that stuff. It's a matter of, as you said, what are we going to do? There's nothing we could do. Well, I would hope that we would continue to find ways to look into this, because, after all, it wasn't until Meisner escaped from his captivity and went to the feds that they had enough to raid Scientology's headquarters and found all of the crimes that had been going on back in the 70s. And there's plenty of abuses and crimes going on now. I don't have a Meisner that we can turn to, but if we can convince somebody that there's sure a pattern here worth investigating. Maybe, and I've talked to David about this, and I may be well off base on this, but maybe somebody can launch a grand jury to be probing, subpoenaing, and digging for documents that would uncover some of the situations that have been going on. Maybe there is some information about collusion in all the purchase of the properties. Maybe there's just tax problems that, Scientology used for decades this building that we gave these developers $500,000 to restore. And Scientology have been using that for storage. They've been using it to train auditors. They actually did the OT3 course in that building for decades. Did they pay any taxes on that building, or was that just unclaimed? I mean, it wasn't owned by Scientology. Were they renting space to do all of this? Maybe they weren't. Maybe if you look into some of this stuff and you find out, oh yeah, there's all sorts of crazy hidden stuff here through their labyrinth of organizations, and there are things that are actionable. We can't find that out, but somebody with more power who might be able to start an investigation probably would. And there's a world of people out there now who aren't afraid to speak up. And in the latest article about Mr. Jennings starting here, Tracy McManus talked about how you and Mr. Jennings and Mr. Margolis are going to sit down to meet with David Miscavige. Fine. I mean, I'd sit down with him myself. But I would like the three of you, if you can all get together, sit down with Mike Rinder. Why not? Find out before you talk to Miscavige what Miscavige thinks, how he operates, what he's really saying to you when he says, oh yeah, I want a vibrant downtown. I mean, that to me would be a proactive step that we could take that would make the city, people in the city who are concerned about the council, say, oh, they do have some balls. Okay, they are trying to do something. They are taking some action. Maybe we won't strip them of the tax exempt status. Maybe we won't convince any of those property owners to actually do anything with the properties they purchased at exorbitant prices. Maybe. But at least the people in Clearwater and around the world, frankly, would be happy to see that we're trying to do something. And sitting down with Mike Rinder is not that hard of an ask. So can we at least make that happen?
Well, Mr. Jennings and Mr. Margolis can meet with anybody they want. I've met with Mr. Rinder several times, so he's been in my office.
All right. So you don't need to be in this meeting. But if
So I did that long before you were ever on this council, and I don't even know where you were living at the time. But that's already occurred, so.
So did you meet him when he was in Scientology then?
No.
Okay. Because I thought maybe this was, when you were office the first time.
No.
Okay.
Since he's left.
All right.
And talked to him subsequently many times, including being on the Leah Remedy show.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm surprised he hasn't told you those stories.
Well, it's not so much that he hasn't said, well, the mayor won't talk to me, because I haven't talked about that. I've talked to him about speaking with the city manager and the city attorney.
Okay.
You know Scientology. You lived here. I know pretty much your stance on Scientology, and you're not in anyone's pocket.
Well, thank you.
But again, just for the sake of the public saying, oh, they're not just sitting back and going, nothing we could do. Maybe we could try something, even if it's just to sit down and educate our newest leaders about what happens here in the city.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yeah, well, I respect your passion, Mark, and I'm glad you shared what your concerns are. I would, well, just since we're going on the record, I'm not afraid of Scientology, whatever that means. I'll meet with anyone and, I'm willing to learn. I would swing this over to our city attorney and ask him, what are our options here?
I would be reluctant to comment too much at a public meeting. I mean, there's a lot of things to dissect here, right? I mean, one aspect of this to dissect is whether or not there's any illegal activity taking place. That's kind of one set of issues. And then as a totally separate set of issues, there's, in the absence of any illegal activity, or even in the presence of illegal activity, what is council's role and what can this city do, if anything, to navigate that process? So, I mean, those are kind of two big issues to unpack. The way I see it as someone who's brand new to the city and who does not come in, with the background, with the decades of history that many of you have, there's really three big picture philosophical approaches that the council can take when it comes to interacting with Scientology. One philosophical approach is to partner with them and to find a way to move forward that advances both of our interests. The second philosophical approach is to build around them, to effectively ignore them, don't talk to them, don't talk about them. They are on their path, we're on our path, has nothing to do with each other. And the third is some kind of path of conflict, whether that is a path of with law enforcement or through other means. Those are what I see as kind of the three big picture philosophical approaches of how to approach this topic. Which of those three philosophies to pursue is really a decision for council. I feel that Mr. Jennings and I probably are going to take our lead from the majority of council as to what direction you guys want to go. Once a philosophical approach has been outlined to us, which I would recommend during one-on-ones, or Mr. Jennings and I can meet with each of you individually to get a sense of that, that kind of guides everything else. So that's my 2 cents as someone who's new to the city.
Can I follow up and ask, so Councilmember Hamilton mentioned that perhaps a federal entity or the Attorney General in the state has done some investigating and made some conclusions. Can we at least ask if that has happened?
We can certainly ask if that's what council would like us to do.
I mean, knowledge is power, right? I mean, we should know if something has been investigated. As you said, they could have been here, we don't know.
I would, you take somebody like the IRS and the federal government, and you give somebody a tax exemption on something, I think the IRS pays pretty close attention. Hey, these people have a tax exemption, and it's based on this. We need to make sure they still have that. And I would think it would be good business and good standard and business practice to periodically verify that they still, whatever entity it is entitled to whatever tax exemption it is they've been granted. Now, that, to me, that just makes common sense. Now, whether or not they've done that, I don't know. But, yeah, like I've said many, many times, I was born here before Scientology. I was here before Scientology ever got here. I've been here the whole time they've been here. Am I happy with what they've done to our city? No. But they are not the reason downtown is in the condition, got to the condition it was in. They took advantage of a downtown that was deteriorating because of the expansion of our city out towards US 19 and whatnot. But as I've told many people, if I had my druthers, would I rather Scientology not be in Clearwater? Absolutely. But until you can bring forward anybody, and I put this out there, until anybody or somebody can bring forward a verifiable, actionable crime by Scientology, you bring forward a verifiable, actionable crime of Scientology, I'll guarantee you the Clearwater Police Department will jump all over it. They'll investigate it just like they do everything else. But you've got to have that. And to my knowledge, it just hasn't come forward. So, it's...
Yeah, Scientologists have a policy that you don't go to the police. That's why we cover up, Scientology covers up a lot of the crimes, because they're told that as a Scientologist, if you report some crime to the police, well, you're going to be disconnected, you'll be tossed out, and you won't see your family anymore. And the police and lawyers, that's all part of a wog world, which we are part of. We are lowly wogs who don't have Hubbard's tech. These are the terms that they use. So Scientologists are trained not to trust authority. Only listen to what Scientology says. So it is hard to get people to come forward. It'd be great if we had an atmosphere where people really felt safe coming to us, but then we have all the sunshine laws here, where we couldn't keep anyone secret if they did reach out to us. So that's kind of a difficult situation.
Well, they can if they reach out to our police department. If they reach out to you or me, that's a different story.
All right. Anyway, again, when I put this on the agenda, I knew I'm not going to ask for us to do anything. I just thought it's important that we talk about it with our new leaders here. Be open about this and let the public know that we're concerned. We understand that there's something odd going on with these purchases. And we should be coming up with some new tactics to tackle this problem. And I believe that's something that is already being considered. So that's all.
Well, I think everybody is concerned. I certainly am concerned with our whole city. Sure. I mean, we have to watch the entire city and neighborhoods and different regions of the city and different departments. But one of the reasons that I originally got into elected office was because of downtown's stunted growth, and the things that have been done over the years I think have improved things, but we should be much further along than we are, and that's extraordinarily disappointing. And as I've said, I don't find the behavior to be rational. So at some point, if rational behavior does not break out, then that's going to be an issue. But I think there's different things we can look at, both carrots and sticks. And, some of it's going to be over time. I think everybody's made clear nobody's scared. That really isn't the issue. The issue is, where are we going from here? And, I do try to think strategically about how we can make downtown better. And I will tell you, there are properties that I want. I don't need cash. We're okay with money. We've always been responsible with our budgets. But I would like some land that I think are more strategic to the city than some of the properties that we own. The old CMA property and the fire station are not as strategic as some of the other properties that are owned either by parishioners or by the church that I think would be very beneficial to us advancing downtown. And when we get rid of playing cards, then, we have less to play with and less tools in the toolbox. And that's what I meant earlier about item 2.1. So, all right, we thank everybody. We will see you all on,
Got items for the future.
okay?
Okay. So some ideas for items for the future. Maybe reports from our economic development and CRA directors to see how Greenprint and our stated goals are, what happened to that? New business, okay. Oh, can our fleet manager, Perry Cozen, present to the council our plans for transitioning our fleet to EVs, what that means, what it looks like, and the timeline and budget? How will we be meeting these Greenprint goals? And then maybe reports from our economic development and CRA directors, see how Greenprint and our stated goals factor into their plans and outreach. And then a discussion of maybe involving our upcoming election and our the decisions made about early walk-in voting and any targeted mailers. So, there was some information that targeted mailers or outreach to voters would go to hot voters. And so when I look at voters, I classify them as hot, warm, or cold based on their how many elections they vote in. And then we have new voters. And I would think that it might be better to target warm and new voters rather than hot. Hot voters tend to turn up regardless of a bunch of mailings. But anyway, that's just a conversation maybe in the future.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Jennings?
Yeah, I did want to respond to Councilmember Beckman. As we discussed last week, Mrs. Call and I will talk today or whenever she has time. And then the other items you had mentioned, I just need to talk with the directors to see where we are with each one of those before they get scheduled.
Well, and I'm thinking that, with the county adopting their renewable energy goals, those Ready for 100 targeted goals related to sustainability and the environment, that, that means the whole county is kind of on board here, heading in that direction. And how does that impact our reaching out to developers and businesses?
Well, and I've told the city manager I'd like to discuss doing a moratorium on US 19 for apartments and storage. Yeah. And so that's something I would like to be discussing. The US 19 corridor is going to be swallowed up soon. And so far we have had not one project that has followed the US 19 guidelines for incentives. And that's a tragedy and a waste. And if we don't do something, then there's not going to be any opportunity left. So I know the moratorium concept is frightening to some. We've only talked about it twice, I think, in my 20-year history. And we backed down on both of them. But I think it's going to be a lost opportunity that we're going to look back and regret. So, all right, with that, we're adjourned. We'll see everybody Thursday.